Yeah, we're in Sefer Yeshua over here. We're in the fifth parak, and we're going to be starting the ninth pasuk. Pasuk test. Let's go into it. Vayomer Hashem. Main discussion is what is considered a disgrace. Why is the foreskin considered a disgrace? Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua. Hashem told Yehoshua, Hayom galoisi. Today I will roll away. There's two explanations. Either Melashon and Gilgul V'Sivav. Metzudas Dovid says over here. It's like rolling away. Or it could be Hasiroisi, according to Rashi, I will remove. So Hashem says, I'll remove Chirfos Mitzrayim Aleichem, the disgrace, the shame from the Egyptians from upon you. This is actually referring to the foreskin Vayikra shame, Hamakoim Hahu, and they called the name of that place Gilgal Ad Hayom Hazeh. They called it Gilgal, which means to roll away. Next pasuk, Vayachanu Bnei Yisrael Gilgal. The Jews encamped in that place that was already named Gilgal. V'yasu es Pesach bar ba'asar yom l'chodesh be'erev ba'arvos Yericho. And they performed the korban Pesach on the 14th of the month in the plains of Moab, Ba'arvos Moab. That's what they did over here. Be'erev in the evening. This is the pasuk over here, yeah? So the Rashi over here explains in Tess what it means that Hashem was going to remove the disgrace. They would say there's one star, and the name of the star is called Bed. That is a sign about blood. Right? We see it on you, the Egyptian said. That's what Moshe said. Lama Yomru Mitzrayim Le'mor Barahad Siyam. Why should the Egyptians say that they were taken out with Bed? They didn't know that it was referring to the blood from Mila, the Dam Mila. So when they did the circumcision in the time of Yehoshua and the blood came, that already removed the disgrace. Because the Erevav who was with them, they would start making fun of them and everything like that. Radak is going to have a different approach over here. Let's take a look at this in the Mesilos Haneveyem over here, who explains this. He quotes the Rashi, and then he says that according to Rashi, the shame, the disgrace of the circumcision, of the foreskin rather, is that the Egyptians would make fun of it. They said, oh, it's so bad. They would make fun of it. Whereas according to Radak, they said that there were people that came out of Egypt and they were all uncircumcised like the Egyptians. According to that, it wasn't that people were making fun of them, according to the Radak. Rather, it was the actual foreskin itself. It was etzem ha'orla. It was the actual foreskin itself. That was the shame. Why? What's so shameful about the actual foreskin? So, Mesilos Haneveyem quotes the Ralbag, which is right over here on the page, on this underlined idea over here. It says it's possible the foreskin could cause desires when it comes to relations, because the Egyptians were very immodest when it came to relations. So the milah, the circumcision, its purpose is lahachlish koyach zeh. It weakens this desire. That's the shame over there. That's what the Mesilos Haneveyem quotes, this Ralbag over here. That's why before Yaakov and his children descended to Egypt, because the characteristic of a tzaddik, someone righteous, is yesod, foundation. It means being holy in this area. Yosef paved the way with this. He withstood this test with Eshes Potiphar. That's the idea over here. And he quotes something interesting that's brought in the Avos Yehonasan. Why didn't they perform the circumcision in Shittim? They were there for a duration of 6 months. Because as we just said, the reason for the circumcision is to weaken the desire. And Hashem knew that they were going to sin with these types of matters and with the daughters of Moab and Shittim. So therefore Hashem waited till the right time. This was going to be the right time. This is according to the Mesilos Haneveyem. This is his approach. always explains that this is why the custom is to call a boy by his name only after the circumcision, after the milah. Even the name of someone who's circumcised shouldn't be called before it. Then he says that the foreskin is considered a blemish on a person, like we find by Avram. Hashem said, "His halich lefanav yatam, and be wholesome, be complete." This is analogous to a king, and he said, "Go in front of me to the queen, pass in front of me. Let me look at you." He didn't need to look at her because the king definitely recognized the queen. Intention was to make sure that she didn't have even the smallest possible defect or blemish. When she passed in front of him, he said, "Everything looks good except for one nail on your pinky of your foot." He said, "Fix that nail, cut it a little bit better. Cut the nail." And that's what she did, and then she was complete. That's the same thing with what the milah represents, circumcision. And he brings an interesting story. There was a philosopher that asked Rabbi Yehoshua, who said, "Wait a second, if the disgrace is so disgusting, if the foreskin is so disgusting, why didn't Hashem create man circumcised if it's such a disgrace?" Rabbi Yehoshua said, "Wait a second, why do you cut your hairs over here? You cut your hairs, but you don't cut your beard. Why do you only cut the hairs on your head, but not the hairs on your beard?" That was the custom back then for everyone. They would only cut their hair on their head, not the beards. Not like nowadays. Sometimes people just cut their beards nowadays and they let their hair grow very, very long. He's not into that, the mom always. Long hairdos. Anyways, so this is what Rabbi Yehoshua wanted to say. If you hold that a person should act as you were created, according to you, you should never cut any of the hair on your body. On your head. But your beard, you should cut because you weren't born with your beard hair. So the philosopher responded, "What do you mean? The hairs on my head, they came when I was young. That's why I'm gonna cut them off. But the beard, that came in, that grew when I was older, when I was smarter, so I'm gonna leave that." But Yehoshua said that's precisely the point. According to that idea, you should gouge your eyes out, cut your hands off and your feet, because those grew when you were younger. The philosopher responded with anger, and he said, "Is that a joke? That's ridiculous. These limbs are needed, unlike the hair." Rabbi Yehoshua responded, "That's precisely the point. Everything that Hashem created in the beginning of creation needs to be fixed through mankind. For example, mustard seed, it's bitter. It has to be sweetened up a little bit. Similarly, wheat needs to be fixed, a wheat kernel, chita. You gotta grind it, you gotta knead it, you gotta bake it. Other items as well. They're not fitting to get pleasure from as in their current state. You need to fix them. So too as well when it comes to man. We were created with a blemish. It needs to be fixed. That's the explanation. We were removing the shame, the disgrace from the Egyptians upon us. Because now it's removed. That's the Ma'amois. One interesting question that the Kli Yakar asks on Pasuk Yud is it says, "Vayachu b'nei Yisrael b'Gilgal," that they encamped in Gilgal. It's extra. We already mentioned this in the previous Pasuk. We know where they camped. So why do you need to say it again? Now they camped, they're happy. They performed the korban Pesach sacrifice. And they weren't worried. They weren't worried about that they were going to go into Yericho, that they were going to go into their wars. They had belief in Hashem. They camped in Gilgal peacefully. Another explanation is above. They were called an Am, a nation, because they were still uncircumcised. But now this pasuk refers to them as what? Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. Since they're circumcised and perform the korban Pesach. Now they definitely believed. That earlier pasuk, by the way, that the Gliyakar is coming from, is in pasuk Ches, 2 pasukim earlier. It should be pointed out that it's very interesting when you read this pasuk over here. It talks about when they brought the korban Pesach. Yachnu b'nei Yisrael b'Gilgal v'yasu tzapesach b'arbasar yom l'chodesh ba'erev. They did it at night. You don't do the korban Pesach at night. So the Metzudas already picks up on this. Metzudas doesn't like this terminology. He says, Achar chatzot sayoim karu erev. After halachic midday is called erev, because that's when the sun starts tilting to the erev side, aka Ma'ariv, to the western side. So it doesn't actually mean erev. It's an important point, but the Metzudas. Malbim explains that they're only allowed to perform the mitzvah of Korban Pesach now since they were circumcised, unlike before. That is basically the idea. The Artscroll in their commentary over here. They say that now that the Jews had Mila, circumcision, they're allowed to bring the Korban Pesach, first time in 39 years. Then a radical change happened. No longer were the people going to be nourished from the mann. This is going to be next time we're going to discuss it. From this time on, they're going to have to produce their own food. And their challenge would be to recognize that no matter how hard someone works for sustenance, it's ultimately a gift from Hashem. Very difficult a lot of times. People, they make a lot of money, whatever it is that they do, whatever job they have. And then they get caught up. They don't think that it's Hashem. It was just because of their endeavors, their efforts. It's something very important to discuss. Okay, so this is the idea of why the foreskin is considered a disgrace. Next time we will go into the next pasuk. Looks like the next few pasukim, the next 2 pasukim we're going to do in one shot. We're going to learn more about the mann. So that should be interesting. We're going to go to the mann, and this is basically going to be the end of the Milah. I think we discussed a lot on Milah. Some were interesting. A lot of insights over here. And that's basically what's on the menu for next. So keep watching, keep learning.